Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Lillian, and I just like to make these videos to chat about the books that I read. Today I have my special guests back in the background. They're very comfortable, so hopefully that adds to the calming vibes. We have David Meowie doing the Superman pose, I guess, and then Paula Abdul is kind of his blanket right now. Today, I want to talk about a book called Now That It's Over. This is by Thiam, and it won the Epigram Fiction Prize in 2015, which is for unpublished novels. And so then this was published the next year in 2016. And the basic premise of this book is that we are following two sets of couples, Yi-sheng and her husband Yi-sheng. And then Yi-sheng has a friend named Cody, and his partner's name is Yi-sheng. So throughout the book, we follow the perspective of each of these four characters in third person. And then there is also a little bit of narration that kind of describes what's going on. And the central theme is that these couples are on vacation in Phuket when the 2004 Boxing Day tsunami happens, which was a very devastating tsunami that resulted in a lot of casualties. And that's kind of the backdrop for the plot and the action. But it's more of the backdrop because what we are doing is going into their past and understanding the interiority and the internal kind of lives of each of these characters, as well as the relationships that they're in. To me, this book does one thing really well, which is explores this idea of when an event brings your life kind of into stark relief. So I feel that all of us are kind of just going through the motions, doing our day-to-day thing, but then sometimes we'll either have a conversation or a event happen, or in this case, like a natural disaster that really is pivotal and makes you reflect and think about all of the things that have been leading up to that event. And so I think this book does that very well. The tsunami is kind of almost the backdrop. So obviously it's a very traumatic event, and each of the characters experiences it in a very dramatic way. But it's almost just the framing device to dig a bit deeper into each of these characters. What are their fears? What drives them? And maybe how they feel misunderstood in their relationships. And I really like that. I'm glad that it wasn't something that was just focused on the plot and the action, but more use that idea of these friends on vacation when a tsunami hits as kind of the framing device to then look at other more underlying or nascent themes. So when it comes to some of those more underlying themes or feelings that each of these characters are going through, I did really relate to what Eiling, I think, was feeling. She really wants kids, but she had a miscarriage, which she didn't feel comfortable sharing with her husband. And I feel like that is a very isolating and difficult time to go through, but just in general, the pressures of being a young woman in society, but also in Singapore, where she doesn't feel fully comfortable going along with what everyone else is doing, but then also has kind of found herself on that path anyway. And there's a lot of like eeriness and quiet underlying discomfort from her character that I think was portrayed really well on the page. Also, the dynamic of going on holiday with her husband and her friends, partner, like the four of them coming together. I think the author captured that dynamic of it being full of opportunity and excitement, but also a little bit off because everyone's kind of living their own lives and has their own things that they're worried about. And so we do definitely take a deeper look into her relationship with her husband, and also how the husband feels about it and how he feels like there's a bit of a disconnect or a distancing with Eiling that he can't pin down. And for the other couple, their issues are maybe a bit more in your face. So there's the question of cheating and the fact that they've been together for so long. as a queer couple in Singapore, but what does that really look like in terms of their future and not being able to buy public housing or to get married? But that's definitely very underlying. I think rather than making any type of political statements at all, the author is instead kind of examining the nuances and the domesticities of the lives of these two couples. We also go into their backgrounds. We learn about their childhoods. We learn about formative experiences in their lives. We learn about their parents a little bit. And so I do think the author did a really great job in fleshing out these characters and building them up so that we can then understand their relationships and the issues that they're facing. One thing I did think was that these personal stories and these interrelational aspects were almost more engaging than the present day plot. So the present day plot is they're in Phuket, the tsunami has happened, and Wei-sheng is trying to find Eileen because she's missing. And then Cody and Yi-sheng also get separated, and Yi-sheng wakes up in this old woman's hut with all of these scrapes and bruises. He doesn't know where he is. He probably got washed really far away from the resort where they were staying. And so the present day plot is trying to find Eileen and figure out what happened to her, as well as Yi-sheng being taken care of and trying to also be reunited with Cody. And then in between those events, you are doing all the flashbacks and understanding more about the characters' psychologies. So I definitely felt like those flashbacks and understanding their backgrounds and previous formative incidents and events were more compelling than the present day plot. But I think that was probably intentional because, again, I feel like the tsunami is just that one framing event that then causes all of the introspection and the reflection. So I think that was on purpose and maybe not necessarily a huge flaw. I also think how things are revealed in the story really builds this sense of anticipation. And I just love the idea that our domestic lives, our feelings, our day-to-day thoughts, and everyday routines are just as dramatic and compelling as the plot that's happening as a tsunami unfolds. And so I love that juxtaposition of your standard, very action-driven, what should they do because the tsunami just hit, with it equates it as being as serious and as important as what we're doing in our everyday lives with our partner who we've known for years and years, with our insecurities and our doubts that we've been grappling with, our feelings that we're not fully sure how to process. That's as important as something as dramatic or traumatic as a natural disaster. That's kind of one message I took away that I really liked from this novel. And I do think the sequence with which things are revealed or unfold did a good job of building an overall sense of anticipation, a little bit to figure out what happens, but also I just loved uncovering these characters and discovering things about them. The other thing I'll add is the author definitely also creates kind of an eerie atmosphere bordering on supernatural. There are a few things that happen which I'm not fully sure how they happened or what they mean, and I think it's meant to be unexplained. I don't think it's a mistake. I think it's kind of part of his world building that he's trying to have kind of this almost dreamlike or otherworldly sensation. So for example, even just the fact that this old woman discovers Yi-sheng and starts taking care of him is kind of mysterious and odd. And I guess she doesn't have a cell phone, or she's very disconnected from the rest of the village because he stays with her for a few days. There's also this recurring image of a boy. So Eileen definitely has suffered loss in her miscarriage, and I think one part of her really wants kids or really feels an affinity towards the idea of a young boy. The story talks about how she's a teacher and a young boy goes missing, and she becomes very obsessed with that and what has happened in that case. So there is kind of this 5 to 7 year old boy that keeps coming up in different stories and in Phuket. And also a boy leads Wei-sheng around the town to try and search for Eileen. But I never really figured out is this the same boy? But it's definitely more of a metaphor of a young boy representing her loss and then Wei-sheng's loss. But because it's an actual character in the book, it's a little bit kind of eerie, and you're not really sure how it's possible or realistic that that would happen. So I don't think that detracted. I think it really added to the overall sense of anticipation and kind of like that dreamlike state when you're really out of sorts, something like insanely, like a natural disaster has just happened and you're really questioning everything and also just in shock. So I feel like that added to that type of feeling throughout the book. And then I think finally, one other big message that I took from the book is just feeling like you're not in control of your life. Like, obviously, the tsunami is a very literal metaphor for a force that wreaks havoc and you don't have control. But again, in our day-to-day lives, we also can feel very out of control and feel like we're just set on these paths where we didn't have much say or we didn't make any active choices, especially in the case of Cody and Yi-sheng. Like, I really loved how the author described how they met, how they got together, all of the banalities of their everyday domestic life, because you can tell they love each other and they have a lot of alignment and that they are good for each other. But then it also gets to a point where they're not sure if they should stay together or break up, because it did kind of just become something that they fell into and didn't actively choose over and over. So I just love that as a theme, the theme of not feeling in control and just questioning, like, how often are we actually deciding things for ourselves versus just going along the path of inertia. So overall, I did really enjoy this. And I think for the rating on my Goodreads, I gave this 4 stars. And I said, this captures what it feels like to not feel in control of your life, but to have your upbringing and your routine carry you along and shape you. Ooh, that's good, because it's the same as like a tsunami carrying you along and shaping you. The different point of views and events leading up to and after the tsunami being slowly revealed worked for me. The ever-present boy character confused me, though. He's almost a supernatural figure. Did he notice Eiling at the beach and also die to be buried by his grandmother? Okay, so again, there's this boy that keeps coming up. Oh, the cats are so cute. They're grooming each other. But anyway, so I was a little confused. I didn't really understand who this boy was or why a young boy kept popping up. But I'm the kind of reader where if something doesn't make sense, but it adds to the overall ambiance, I usually like it and I don't find a problem with it. And then the last point I said is the author's characterization of his 4 main characters sometimes felt like he was going through a checklist of particulars to cover, telling rather than showing. So that's true. I think when the author was discussing like the parents and the backgrounds and the upbringing, they were all blurring together. I don't know that they really connected so much to how the character was feeling or acting in the present day. Obviously, there was a lot of kind of natural connections between the backgrounds and where they are today, but it did kind of feel like he was like, okay, now I have to describe what the dad did, and now I have to describe what the mother was like, and now I have to describe where they divorced, or and I think it didn't need to be so checklisty. Like, I didn't end up remembering a lot of it as being significant. But I do really recommend this. Let me know if you've read it and what your thoughts are. I think it's a really interesting portrayal of a natural disaster, because rather than having the natural disaster take the sole focus, it's really just more of a framing device to look inward into these characters. I'm sure that's been done in other books, but I don't think it's been done for this particular disaster or in this context or for Singaporeans, or, really looking at the effects of the Boxing Day tsunami. I know there's that movie with Naomi Watson called The Impossible, I think, which was criticized because it took the point of view of like white tourists, and the whole movie is about how they kind of dealt with the aftermath of that tsunami. Let me just double check that is what that movie is called. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, that movie came out in 2012. It's called The Impossible. And yeah, Naomi Watts and Tom Holland, are in that. And it's based on the experience of Maria Ballone and her family. So, okay, cool. Like, sure, white people and tourists can have their stories told, but obviously that's the thing that Hollywood prefers, and that's always what gets funded. So this is almost like a companion thing, but a lot deep. Well, I haven't seen the movie, but I'm assuming like a lot deeper and a little bit more interesting, because it's really not about the tsunami. It's the tsunami is a metaphor, guys, for forces that just carry you along and shape you, but you don't really feel in control. So it might be a little bit simple and obvious, but I didn't find it simple or obvious. I thought it was really cool and kind of deep. So if you're looking for something along those lines, I would recommend checking out Now That It's Over. Thanks for watching as always, guys, and I'll catch you in the next one.